We have been just going through an eloquent, profound, erudite discourse on bamboo and its technical evolutions, its future, and macroeconomics by Dr. Bharati, who is a renowned scholar, relentless researcher, eminent scientist, and aptly known as father of Bhima. Sir, I am neither a scholar nor a researcher, leave alone scientist. I am not even an entrepreneur. I am just a farmer. So I hope all of you understand my trepidation and nervousness in entering into the web of webinars on bamboo.
So you're doing great, sir. Don't worry. We are with you. We would like to hear your story.
It's a story only. I'm a farmer, practicing farmer at that. In the pursuit of finding livelihood in marginal, challenging, rather wastelands bereft of any irrigation potential by cultivating bamboo. Well, in that sense, I may touch upon the present and a bit of microeconomics of bamboo. And let me start by thanking Bamboo Society of India, especially Dr. Sundar Naik and Mr. Punati Sridhar and Ranganath, who actually persuaded me to venture into this exercise. Well, all of us know that there are hundreds of variety species of bamboo all over India. Some are found in the wild everywhere. Some are found especially so in Northeast. Some are confined to certain geographical areas. Some are confined to bamboo satums and research institutions of bamboo. Today, I am speaking about one particular species of bamboo which is endemic to West Coast and area towards Western Ghats, right from Kasaragod and beyond in Kerala to Sindhudurg in Maharashtra and all along the west coast of Karnataka, we find this species. But being confined to only and exclusively some farmyards, backyards of farmers who traditionally grow it, and I did not find it naturally growing in the wild in any forest areas. Even in my family, native place, which is in Honnavara Taluka, I do have a clump of two of this particular species, traditionally grown. In fact, my father used to tell that he inherited the clump from his parents. This is grown traditionally, not as an economic or a commercial proposition, but as a traditional need of household artifacts. Yes, household artifacts, right from the proverbial cradle to cajole the infants, to tiny toys like children, to act as handles to various agriculture implements, to use as ladder to climb inaccessible trees, to use as poles to pluck arboreal fruits and nuts, use as fodder, use as medicine. Why? We must be, I am actually still savor the taste of pickle, bonda, sabji, sambar made of the tender shoots of this species. You might have guessed the name of the species already, but let me give you some more specialities of the species. It doesn't, unlike its close relatives, suffer the ignoble death periodically, sporadically, gregariously, or otherwise due to seeding. It is thornless. It is solid, at least most part of it. And its nodes are soft, internodes are long, enabling it to be peeled to make a mats who has baskets. And what is heartening is it is endowed with the genetical characteristic that grow its culms with a space, internal space, so that you don't have to go for horseshoe method or any other method, so that you can choose whatever culm you want and remove it without damaging other culms or affecting the health of the clump as a whole. Yes, the species, as you might have guessed, is Dendrocalamus stocksii. And I am growing this for the last 3 decades, since 1988 to be exact. As Nanak has already told you, it is known as Shame bamboo, also called as Sime bamboo, and the forest department refers to it as Maria bamboo. I think in Maharashtra it is called Manga bamboo. Well, you may question, why did I choose to cultivate this species as a livelihood model? To be frank, it was almost as a Hobson's choice. Let me narrate a small story. I was working in 1986 as a rainforest officer in Banwasi, but being from a traditional areca growing family, I wanted to have my own areca garden. I purchased about 17 acres of land nearby in Mathihalli village of Hangal Taluka. Especially after seeing an open well brimming full with water during the hot summer of May, I thought I can convert the entire 17 acres into a areca garden. But to my dismay, I soon found that the water available was hardly sufficient for 2 acres and the spring was shallow. So I was left with 15 acres of land. So anyway, I imitated my neighbors there. I copied them. I planted 5 acres paddy and 10 acres cotton. 1987 it is. Of course, I did all the input management as per prescription. Paddy grew very well, but at the end I came to know, to my consternation, that the yield from paddy was hardly sufficient to cover the cost. Cotton also came up beautifully. The flowers were blossoming, but that particular year there was lack of late rains, so flowers did not transform into yielding cotton. So Pratamachambanam Dantabhagnam in annual crop cultivation. So once bitten is twice shy, as we say. So I thought of cross diversification. So I am from forestry background. So I know if nothing can be grown, then go for eucalyptus. So I did plant eucalyptus in 10 acres, but 5 acres I thought the soil is too good for eucalyptus. So I thought of planting. We areca growers in Malnad normally depend upon nearby forests for procuring biomass, green leaves, green manure, etc. But being in Hangal Taluka, my farm had no adjacent forests. So I thought of cultivating stocksii as an add-on to areca, so that I could collect the dried leaves to work as manure and all. However, I also thought of mixing it with some eucalyptus to act as a wind belt to prevent bending of bamboo, and also honestly to act as an insurance in case bamboo fails to pay me revenue. So I took up an assessment of 5 meter by 5 meter, first at 2 meter apart, of course 5 meter by 2.5 meters. Sorry. It was in 1988. But the work was said easier than done, because I did not have planting material then. There were no Growborn biotech nursery. There was no IWST. Even forest department did not have seedlings of stocksii, even though the clump cutting, vegetative propagation from clump cutting was just gaining some momentum, but it was anyway a long shot. But then I was young man in a hurry. So I thought of collecting some planting material from neighboring farmers in Sirsi Taluka. In fact, I dug out earthen piece of 2 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet from old clumps from areas like Hulekal, Manasi, and Nirnali from Sirsi Taluka, that the farmers used to have some clumps. I cut portion of that clump with dead clumps of already cut stock clumps, transported all the heavy planting material with great difficulty and rather greater stupidity to my farm and planted them in pits as big as graves. In hindsight, I am surprised that many survived. But those which survived did do extremely well. Within 3-4 years, I was getting 10 to 12 kernels per clump, and they were growing as tall as eucalyptus trees and getting even by 6 years, they were already about 6 centimeters, 7 centimeters.
Please go ahead, sir. Treasure-tron.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So by 7th year, when the 5th year culm was ready for cutting, I kept a cycle. I mean, every shoot should be allowed to be there for 3rd year and then it should be cut. So to my pleasant surprise, I had purchasers from Medar communities. Medars, you know, they traditionally depend upon bamboo for their livelihood. They take it, purchase it, then peel them into strips and move into mats, baskets, etc. By 95, 7 years, I used to get purchaser not only from nearby Mungod and Hangal, but also distant places like Shikaripura, Hanali, Davangere, Ranebennur, Hubli, etc. In fact, there was so much of demand that they used to quarrel among themselves, and ultimately I resorted to calling for an auction by gathering all the people. Surprisingly and pleasantly, those stocksy poles which I used to, culms which I used to sell for 20-25 rupees unknowingly, they started fetching 70-75 rupees in the early 1990s itself. By 95, I was ready to cut my first 10 acres plantation of eucalyptus nearby in the same farm. So along with the coffees, I thought bamboo will also grow. So I planted about 900 stockshai seedlings, saplings there immediately after cutting first rotation of eucalyptus in 1996. But this time I was a bit wiser. I planned earlier and prepared my own saplings by vegetative propagation. Of course, as you know, by cutting gums and putting into beds a year before. In fact, that year I sold about 1,000 beautiful seedlings of stocksai to my own department. In fact, I delivered them to Bangalore Aranya Bhavan. And when Mr. Pandey was the conservator, and I think it was planted somewhere in Kolar or Bangalore rural. This mixture of eucalyptus and stocksai was also coming up very well. By now, I was sure that stocksai need not be a monocrop. It can be, though it is a light demander, I know, but it is shade tolerant to an extent. Monocrop anyway, to my mind, is an anathema for ecological prudence and biodiversity management. It is not only compatible with the trees, it is rather symbiotic with it. Stocksai gains mechanical support from trees to grow taller, to erect taller, and Also, the competition for sunlight induced by shades of the trees make it have more linear growth and tall. So I was towards the end of my retirement. I was dreaming of having my own piece of forest, albeit a paying forest. Why not have a forest with a stocksy for annual income? I did have a part of land in my Gokarna where I reside after retirement, and I had a land purchased there before that. Out of 30 acres, 20 acres was garden, and 10 acres was a challenging piece of treasure with a steep slope, tiring hillocks, depleted soil, topsoil, and laterite outcrops, granite outcrops, you name it, full of thorny bushes. In fact, already, though I had planted cashew there, I had abundant collection of cashew nut because the cost of collection itself was more than the revenue realized by selling it. So I bulldozed that area in 2010 and planted stocksy at 5 meter by 5 meter espacement, but took to plant pulpwood acacia hybrid in between in rows at 2.5 meters. Of course, rows, row to row 5 meters because there was stocksy in between. Also, as an experiment, I planted various native timber species like teak, rosewood, matti, beete, matti, nandi, honne, shivane, you name it. Whatever species were found hereby, I planted them in between stocksy in their rows. So it was a crowded thing. I did not know actually the affinity of stocksy with laterites and poor soils. In my farm, where nothing could be grown previously, stocksy was coming up extremely well. It was competing with acacia, and by 5-6 years, it was gaining height of 35 to 40 feet. By 7th year, in fact, it was nearing 45 to 50 feet also. It immediately attracted a new set of customers from as distant a place as Chamaraj Nagar near Mysore, who wanted to purchase that stocksy for poles. When I measured, it was the usable length of the pole was about 40 feet. Its basal girth was 7.5 centimeter, and it was just weighing 9.2 kg. So it was ideal for using as poles after drying. Instead of 70, 80, 100 rupees, when they asked me for price, I told 150 rupees. They readily agreed. And I was wondering whether I should have quoted more. Later I came to know, to my dismay again, that they were selling the same poles for 800 to 1,000 rupees after drying it. They do heat dry it, of course, and straighten it. It may weigh hardly 4 or 5 kgs then after drying. Ultimately, I could realize about 600 to 700 rupees per clump in Hanehalli, and 500 rupees to 600 rupees per clump in my previous place, Mattihalli, where I planted in 1980 to 96. But all was not hunky-dory. History was about to repeat itself, and I have another bout of mistake at my feet. As I already told you, I had already planted stocksy with pulpwood acacia. Acacia was to be removed by 2017 or earlier. No sooner it gets a diameter of 4 inches, I could have cut it and sold it as a pulpwood to Harrier Polyfibers or Dandeli paper mill. But due to my own, of course, some logistic difficulties and my own procrastination and foolhardiness, I allowed the acacia to be there. It was growing like timber. By 2018-19, though bamboo was, Stocksy was going to all, the regeneration of, production of new culms was really getting affected. New shoots were coming less and less. Even my native tree species were actually overshadowed and overburdened, overwhelmed by this acacia. So somehow I had to remove, there was no chance for further delay. So by 2021 January, I could get some people to cut it, and I sold it to Dandeli Paper Mills. But most of, instead of getting pulpwood, I had some timber also. Of course, hybrid timber has no much value. But what was worrying, so the incremental growth of acacia, even though it paid me well, the devastation it caused to bamboo clumps was really disheartening. Not only that, the number of shoots produced later, after 2017, I again reiterate, were less. But while removing that mammoth trees, most of the culms, whatever I left for further management, they were damaged. And it was a heart-rendering scene. But fortunately, we had a copious rains this year also. And already dozens of new shoots are emerging from those clumps. Of course, this year the shoots are not as good as they should be, but I am sure they will regain their glory in a year or two. They will regain their girth and height. Of course, there are some native trees are there, hundreds of them, to be frank, like very important timber species, like again, as I said, teak, rosewood. And meanwhile, even Mother Nature has rewarded my bounty by inducing natural regeneration of hundreds of sandalwood trees in this farm, which were not planted, but now they already have a girth of about 20 centimeter to 30 centimeter. Now, coming to the nitty-gritty of profitability. In fact, you see, my first profit is ease of farming this. I am not doing this as an intensive cultivation, no special input management, absolutely no watering, everything is Mother Nature, because not only here, in Gokarna, where I get about 3,000 to 4,000 millimeter of rainfall, but also in Hangal, where the rainfall is hardly 1,000 millimeter. As per record, it is around 900 millimeter in Hangal Taluka. There also, Stocksy is coming in rain-fed condition. Here also, for rain-fed condition, I hardly put a kg of, 100 grams, 1 kg of, started late actually, after realizing revenue from it. So anyway, the cost of cultivation is next to zero. But each clump in first decade itself gives a saleable clumps of 6 to 8. Second decade it is about 12, and third decade it is about 12 to 15. So the way the revenue, the rate I get is anywhere between 20 to 150, as I said. Of course, 150 is an exception. Let us say even Maida purchase it for jolly well 100 rupees. So average, even if you take about 50, 60 rupees into about 10 clumps at 600 rupees per clump. So I after 3 decades of raising it 5x5 espacement, even for Maida's purpose or minor timber purpose, we could go for 4x4 espacement and still get good sized clumps. So at least 250 clumps per acre and around 1.25 to 1.5 lakhs per acre. In my case, I confess that this calculation of 500 clump into 250 or 160 doesn't work out, because my clumps have died and I did not replace them. And one thing, one should be cautious. If the bamboo fails in between, after planting, it should be replanted immediately. Otherwise, it is very difficult to grow in the shade of bamboo, because initial stage it requires a hot sun. So when failed plantation of bamboo, it is very difficult to be rejuvenated. So this is almost my journey from 1988 till now. Regarding market conditions, less said the better, because I am just a frog in the well. I have got some stocks catering to the demands of various majors. Only in 26 years of my Stocksy sale, only twice I resorted to sell it to people other than majors. Once to Polwalas of Chamaraj Nagar, as I said, and another time to, last year I sold it to Bamboo Packer. Incidentally, Mr. Parmeshwar Iyer, who is a member of Bamboo Society of India, I believe, he's an industrialist bamboo entrepreneur. And I'm told he's purchasing Stocksy even from Northeast. So if any of you feel like growing Stocksy, it will ease on the burden of Mr. Bamboo Packer from purchasing it from Northeast, and it may be available locally. But having narrated my story, I would like to now summarize some salient points which I find to be important, and I would like to give them in a concise form and go through them. Just a minute.
Hello.
Yes.
Mr. Hegde, I have a farming question. Which are the forestry complementary and supplementary crops along with bamboo? And what are the crops which we can take along with bamboo?
Sorry, Harpalji. Can we kindly allow Mr. Hegde to finish the presentation, please?
Sorry.
No, sir. I will definitely come to that. I would love to.
Please. After this, yes, sir. Please.
Okay.
At your convenience, sir.
Am I in time? Yes.
Yeah, you can
Give
go
time.
ahead, no problem.
Okay. See, it is nothing to extempore. I will just try to read them, but I can explain later if need be. Dendrochromis stocksy, though endemic to West Coast, comes up rather well in upper plain, because I tried it in Hangal Taluka, which is around, as the crow flies, it may be more than 100 kilometers from here, and it is plain land. It can be cultivated as a profitable crop under rain-fed conditions, that is without irrigation, even where annual rainfall is just around 1000 millimeter. It is 900 millimeter there. I thought it will come up only when the rains are just like in Gokarna. And it's important, I believe. Being of grass family, there is no reason why stocksy should do well and even better if irrigation is provided in drier areas. Many of the friends who are asking about stocksy cultivation, rather bamboo cultivation, are not from Malnad. They are from drier areas. And I think after Bharati's lecture about bamboos, many of them are asking me, can I grow there with irrigation? In fact, my experience is not without irrigation, but anything which comes without irrigation should do certainly better with irrigation. So any dryland people should be happy to grow bamboo, whichever species, if they have got irrigation potential. Yes. Having grown stocksy at 5 meter by 5 meter esplacement for 3 decades, I feel 4 by 4, that is 250 plants per acre, is quite ideal. Interplanting of pulpwood with few native trees is better for incremental growth of stocksy and of course biodiversity. Pulpwood should be important, harvested, unlike me, before they overwhelm stock size. Native trees can be retained for posterity. Sir, regarding the species that can be chosen as an agroforestry model, I have tried it with eucalyptus. I have tried it in as a co-grower with the second rotational copies of eucalyptus and even third generation of copies, because my 1988 eucalyptus plantation, even though I introduced bamboo in 96, even about 1 year back, I cut the old second rotation trees, somewhere third rotation also. And bamboo is doing extremely well there. Pulpwood, I have tried acacia hybrid here. I don't mind, I don't know why even this subabul or even silver oak should not do well along with bamboo. Only care should be taken to remove them before they overwhelm bamboo, because our principal crop is bamboo. Coming to the beginning of planting, 60 centimeter cubic feet would be fine for planting, depending upon the size of the sapling, of course. We can expect marketable comes from 5th year, which can 5th year come means which can, it has to be cut in the 7th year. I retain the 1st year come, 2nd year come, 3rd year it better if it is cut. Thus regular yield can be harvested from 7th year. Better input management can certainly reduce this gestation period. It is advisable to mark the 2nd and 3rd year columns with distinct color codes, so that there is no confusion in confining the extraction to 3rd year columns. I found it to be very important, because Medas, you see, we sell stock size columns in situ. Medas come and cut it, so there is no cost involved. But what they do, they prefer 2nd year columns. Even if you mark 3rd year columns, they will somehow try to cut 2nd year columns. So even when I marked also, there were some hanky-panky going on, but we can insist at least. This year when I actually marked, sir, I have in Mattihalli, that is Hangal Taluka, I have 3rd year comes 6,000. No, 2nd year comes 6,000, but 3rd year is only 2,000, because 4,000 is already cut without my knowledge or without my being aware of it. So it is better to mark them with color codes. All the columns will not be of uniform size, definitely, and hence may fetch different rates. I get between 20, 30, 60, 80, 100, 120, 150, like that. It is better to remove, nevertheless. All the 3rd year comes, even if some of them are not marketable due to deformities. If you sell to Medar, they will certainly choose. But those which cannot be sold, also it is better to remove them and use it for any other purpose, or sell it to ice candy wallas or anything, so that optimum size and ideal hygiene of the clumps are maintained. Frequent weedings may be needed in early years, but later on, one post-monsoon weeding is sufficient. Annual scooping of dried leaves in the autumn, that I do. The purpose of my stockseed plantation was the dried leaves, actually, as I told you. And it is excellent vermicompost material, excellent fodder, excellent, biomass, anything. I am told it is very good in silica content and poultry also. Annual scooping of dried leaves in the autumn may deprive humus from the plantation, but makes good sense as an effective fire protection measure. Stock leaves are good fodder and excellent for composting and vermicomposting, of course.
And in India also.
An annual application of NPK on the onset of monsoon is advisable.
So Monday.
A mixture of 25 grams of urea, 26 to be exact, 45 grams of DAP, and
Okay.
5 grams of MOP per culm is equivalent to providing 100 grams of compost fertilizer like Sampurna, Supala or anything. And it works out 30% cheaper than the composite fertilizer. I do what I do. If there are 100 culms, suppose, then 35 kg and 40 kg I mix and then apply to culms. A fence is needed to keep the grazing animals at bay, but more is needed to protect the new shoots from monkeys and wild boar. A pack of dogs and a box of flying firecrackers can do wonders. In fact, I do have a pack of dogs and I do burn crackers in unseason. Whenever in June, July, August, when the monkeys infest my farm, because there are trees, no, so they'll be sitting on the tree and damaging the culms, breaking the culms. They do hell of a job, and so the firecrackers, they do better job. Frequent application of phorate and thymate to culms will mitigate the wild boar menace. I think due to smell, they can be kept at bay. I am told heaping human hairs around culms will do better job, because I think the hairs will enter the nostrils of the boars, and I don't know, it was told by one Mr. Ramakrishna, professor of forestry in Forestry College, and he's a native of sea area because he knows better. So it can be tried. Occasional soil working by loosening the earth all around the clump and heaping the same on the entire clump is advisable to augment nutrient intake and also to congest roots. This is, of course, annual extraction of mature culms should be attempted. After the new culms of the year are fully grown and hardened, that we know. But Dr. Bharati sir, extracting just before rains allows the cut culms to keep alive, and they sprout small branches on the onset of rains. I don't know, I am not really know its significance, but as a thumb rule, for me, anything alive is better than the dead. If you cut the culms in November, December, January, they don't sprout any branches. Of course, branches are useless only, but nevertheless, it's a branch. But if you cut it in May, by June 15, June 30th, almost all these stumps out of cut culms will produce a small branch with some leaves. Sorry, I don't know whether I could do justice to the task given, but anyway, you please feel free to ask questions so that I can, within the ambit of my own competence, I will try to do what I can.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, who would like to ask any questions to Sri Hegde ji, please raise your hand.
I have a question to ask. I am Pramod Kant.
Please, sir, go ahead.
Sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hegde. It's a really great lecture which followed another great lecture by Dr. Bharati earlier. And much of this information, you spoke of the Northeast, and this species also grow in Northeast. And yes, I had a good fortune, though I belonged to Tamil Nadu cadre. I also worked for a considerable length of time in the Northeast. And yes, this is an important species there too. What I was just wondering was, you spoke of Chamarajanagar. I used to visit Chamarajanagar very often, and this was an area which is, though low in rainfall, has a good bamboo. Though not Stocksai. The Stocksai is not there, otherwise naturally found in Chaman. That is not that I could see at least. I'm talking of my visits used to be long back, very frequent visit. Later on, it has been rare visits only. I was wondering whether if you plant Stocksai in areas like Chamarajanagar, which are low in rainfall, 900 millimeter, 800 millimeter, or maybe 1000 millimeter or so. If you combine that with moisture conservation measures, trenching, and also stone wall along the contours, this might raise the productivity of this bamboo in this area, because that is something similar I have seen in the Northeast. I'm not able to give any figures to how much will be increased, but this might be helpful by low cost trench digging, whatever that is low cost, where it is possible. Somewhere it is combined with the stone wall, somewhere trenching way, because trenching everywhere can be costly. So that might perhaps work in this area, in Chamarajanagar area, low rainfall areas. Thank you very much. Again, very grateful to you for your talk. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. In fact, I don't know why it should not come, whether it is Chamarajanagar or whether it is Bidar, because only temperature should be the constraint, for which I am not knowledgeable to talk about. But otherwise, you see, sir, normally, previously, as traditional farmers, we were thinking that coconut and areca they are endemic and confined, and they are confined to coastal areas.
Right.
Whereas now, in fact, Chitradurga people, they do better work job with areca nut, with coconut. So why not bamboo? So anywhere, if you do, as you said, moisture conservation is certainly not that difficult a job. Even if you put a small bunds, area will be certainly certain undulations will be there.
Yeah.
Some bund farming will conservation measures. And I think just June, July, August, or maybe September, October, like that, about 2-3 months of moisture is good enough for bamboo, especially Stocksai. So I think it should come up really. I wonder it can do even better than here. Just as I seen coconut doing better in Chitradurga than here, or areca is doing as good as there here. It should come.
Right.
Unless temperature is set. I have no idea about that.
This bamboo, Dendrocolumbus stocksii, Mariada bamboo, comes up in coastal area. No doubt it can grow anywhere, even Bangalore, Kolar, and other places. But maybe because of humidity condition and a sandy soil, humidity condition, it grows quite tall in the coastal area. From Bhatkala, Honnavara up to Belgaum, it grows very tall. In Kolar also, I have seen Dendrocolumbus stocksii. It comes up, but it is after a few feet growth, it bends. It bends like anything. That may be the humidity, may be the one of the reasons.
Sir, may I intervene?
Yeah.
Just 1 second about this, sir.
Please.
I have seen a friend of mine growing the stocksai in Mundgod, near my farm there. And 6-8 feet it was bending. And but the two things I observed there were absolutely no trees in between. There was heavy wind, and the spacement was about 2 meters or 3 meters. So normally the stocksai comes where of lesser diameter because of closer spacement, and wind damage. Of course, wind speed was also there. It was a bailu. I mean, it's a flat land, and there are no trees. I still believe that because of presence of trees, the stocksai goes taller. In fact, traditionally also, sir, wherever you see Malnad, they prefer to have a clump near a tree, either a jackfruit tree or some other tree. Most of the farmers I have seen, traditional farmers having traditional, inherited clumps, they are somehow near the trees. I have told even in Sindhudurga, Ratnagiri also, people practice the same and they do have a stocksai planted by their ancestors near a tree. That may be the reason also. I know. No, no.
Maybe true. Maybe true. Yeah. Any more
Hello.
questions?
Yeah. Shri
Sir, can-
Harpalji, please go ahead, sir.
Hanji, hanji. You see, my question was, since I'm in north and bamboo is long gone from this place, I had tried some years back and it grew beautifully, but I didn't know what variety it was. And I'm encouraged, I'm sure we can grow bamboo this side of India. And we have irrigated facilities and all sorts of things. And since the government is really sick of us producing rice and wheat, so we could replace it with bamboo. A lot of people have gone abroad because they just couldn't meet two ends, the farmers itself. So that's one crop which can substitute this thing, wheat and rice. And plus we are already into this biomass control and biochar and blah blah other things. My question was that can we grow some vegetables and other like see some kind of a like turmeric and ginger, etc. in between the rows?
Intercropping.
If it happens, then it'll be encouraging for the farmers.
But sir, it will be okay only for the first year, at the most maybe second year, because after that bamboo shoots will overshadow the land unless of course really well spaced. So otherwise what happens is within 2-3 years the bamboo branches will be tend to bend anyway, and the shade will be there, and whether it's turmeric or ginger, it may not do so well with undershade. One thing. Another thing, root structure of both these agricultural crops and bamboo, they are roots, surface roots. So I think there will be some competition also. So for first year, I think it's okay, but subsequently it may be difficult.
You see,
but anyway, many of the farmers in Maharashtra are trying that. I know they are doing it. Ginger.
see the turmeric. This you see, there are certain medicinal crops, and the turmeric itself, it needs shade, and people are growing between the forestry, like you see eucalyptus trees and all that. It's already happening here, and okay. Anyway, I get the clue what you want to say, but that was
again,
one
sir,
thing.
and it all depends on what is the spacing you adopt for bamboo. If they are nearer, then intercropping may be difficult. If they are farer, then of course intercropping is possible. But again, infestation of weeds and all, they may. And actually, my area expertise is really ease of farming, not of intensive cultivation. So I may not be the proper person to answer that, because for me, easier the better. Thank you.
No, we love hardest the better.
Certainly, you can try. You can try. Nothing like that.
That's all right. I get the clue. It can be. Yes, thank you very much. And there are so many other questions. I don't want to take other people's time. Thank you. Thank you.
You
Move on
can
to Dr.
contact me
Bharti.
personally on WhatsApp.
Thank you. What Singh is asking, in bamboo, there are 3 ways of growing bamboo and a gender. One is agroforestry model, where you give a very wide gap between 2 rows of bamboo and plant the bamboo in the east-west row. The second is you conventionally grow the bamboo with a spacing of somewhere between 15 feet to 20 feet between the bamboos, which as Hegde said, we can grow for first 1 or 2 years, then after that you cannot grow it. The third model is intensive model, only bamboo, no the intercrop. Bamboo become an intercrop between the bamboo. So that's how it's going to be intensive. So in a wider crop, in the agroforestry model, you plant the bamboo at a spacing of 30 to 40 feet between 2 rows, but continuous row of bamboo, whereby you're able to create 2 things. One is a microclimatic condition. If a winter is going to be severe, between the 2 rows of bamboo, it's not going to be. Similarly, when the summer in Punjab is going to be dry and hot, and that time also the bamboo will be able to take care of the beating of the higher temperature increase the humidity, microclimate is altered. So that's also possible. You can grow tomato even in the summer. It will not crack. Normally, you can grow the tomato outside. It's going to crack in the open field. So this is a model where it's an agroforestry model where you grow the bamboo and preferably a straight growing bamboo instead of arching bamboo. There are two types of, when you haul the bamboo could be converted, classified into arching bamboo or a straight bamboo. Like Thyrostachys oliveri. It's a straight bamboo where it will grow vertically and it will be east-west. No shade will be created by the sunlight and the bamboo is going to grow. As Mr. Hegde said now, the roots, the bamboo root grows only for 2 feet depth, but laterally they try to grow for 10 feet. But immediately after the bamboo row, which means around 3 feet or 4 feet from the bamboo row, make a trench. A continuous trench parallel to the bamboo row, whereby the root will not jump from your bamboo side to the central portion where your vegetable crops or all other crops are going to grow. In fact, I am working on a project to grow bamboo in UAE, dry desert. Grow bamboo, not for bamboo, to grow other crops in between. We are going to create greenhouse with the bamboo, not with the plastic sheet. And
Dr. Bharti, what sort of water, what pH water or you see it can tolerate?
see, the bamboo has got 2 stages. Yes, bamboo has got 2 stages. One is juvenile stage, another is adult stage. The juvenile stage starts from, it remains for first 1 or 2 years, depending on the size of rhizome you planted in the bamboo. So during the time, should be a normal water, normal irrigated water with it again depends on the pH of the soil and the water together. Bamboo prefers to have an acidic pH. And when Hegde also said, he said if I was finding all these bamboo in a laterite soil is better because the pH is acidic. Whereas normally all other places we have an alkaline pH. In fact, we also grown bamboo even in a highly alkaline, up to 9, 10, 10.5 in a sodic soil. So bamboo will be able to buffer, correct itself and start growing in that. As Mr. Hegde also showing a lot of slides with the bamboo leaves. Even on the screen, what you see in the sides, bamboo leaves are there. When they degrade, the degradation leads to increase in organic carbon, release of humic acid, changes the pH. And that pH also is able to change or alter the soil pH. But ultimately, when you grow the bamboo in the beginning, it could be a different pH. But when you start growing the bamboo, the soil will become neutral pH because of the leaf which is keep falling to an extent of 4 tons of dry leaf per acre per year. And bamboo can be a good agroforestry crop to grow all other crops. We have grown more than around 30 different crops. This particular presentation, I don't have that here, but then we have beans grown, soya bean, sugarcane, ginger, turmeric, and even rice, banana. All these could be grown very well between the 2 bamboos. So bamboo could be an agroforestry model where you, instead of going for closer planting or a wider planting, much wider planting, we should do that. And the direction of planting.
Dr. Bharti, we have, waterlogging areas during rainy season, there water kind of accumulates and then we sow another crop, but this year there'll be too much rain in certain areas. Can we raise the beds and grow bamboo on it?
Exactly. Instead of bed, you should make a bund. Bund of whatever the height is, height of water stagnation. If it is going to be, let's say, around 2 feet tall, 2 feet high depth, then we should raise a bund. In the bund, you can plant the bamboo as a row and you can grow it. We have done it in a paddy field with a water of 4 feet depth. And if somebody walks inside, the knee up to knee, it will go down. So, sorry, not 4 feet, 2 feet, 2 feet depth. So the bamboo can be made to grow. Bamboo is a excellent crop for us, swampy land, water bodies, boundaries, river boundaries, including paddy fields and the swampy land. So like, in the tea estates and coffee estate, normally you have between the 2 hillocks, there will be a swampy land. Bamboo grows very well. But the way in which you plant them is more important. The agronomy is important. Almost all bamboo can grow, including Stocksy or Newton's, Tulda. Yeah, all the bamboo, they'll be able to grow very well. No problem at all. But it's
in North India, like Haryana, Punjab?
Very well. I think you're talking about the clay soil with a pH of more than 7, 8, 9 pH.
Yeah, right? 9 pH. Yes,
Right.
yes. You
See, the percolation of water doesn't take place because of the high pH, the colloidal substance, they block the water not getting into the ground. So when the moment you start growing bamboo, the leaf in 3 years time, the leaf will change the pH to 7 and the water percolation is going to be very, very easy and smooth. So in fact, the water stagnation itself will not come there.
Excellent. So can we grow the nursery here, or maybe I have just set up a lab and with your help, we can set up something, to have the nursery.
Sure. We are doing throughout the world, sir. Punjab is very close.
Yeah, I know that. But the basic thing is we are facing a lot of problems and we are being kind of fingered at as well. You know it. So
Sir, we'll discuss after the conference. Yes,
there
sir.
are thousands of acres available here.
Very true. Sir,
So
in the same situation, I'll tell you, the Karnataka also, North Karnataka, they have more than 1,30,000 acres of sodic soil because after the sugarcane is grown and bamboo is going to be replaced, and they started an experiment with that. I think in this 25th or 26th, they're going to have a meeting with the ministers, Honorable Minister for Forestry, and they are going to show to farmers that these lands could be reclaimed with the help of bamboo, and which is already done 10 years back, but it's going to happen in Karnataka in a big track. I think the same example you can take it to Punjab.
Excellent. I was imagining the same thing as a farmer because there are some intuitions because of experience. So I appreciate what you have said. But the basic material, planting material is a hiccup, and the varieties we don't know about. So that's where we would need the guidance.
So I think Bamboo Society of India has good resources for all this. That's the reason all these meetings are being conducted now. People like me, there are many other people also available in our group, and they will be able to guide you all this.
I've just been in touch with the PAU in charge of bamboo plantation, and I tried to give his number so that he could be included in the group, so that at least we know which variety is suitable for this area, because that's the hiccup here at the moment.
Sure.
Thank you, Doctor. We'll talk separately.
Yes.
Thank you, Hegde ji. Thank you, Dr. Bharti sir. I would like to invite our ED, Shri Sridhar Punati ji, please, for the vote of thanks, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today it was a very, very useful and excellent session. On behalf of BSI and on behalf of all the participants, I extend our hearty thanks to Dr. Bharti for giving a very deep insight into use of bamboo for ethanol. Getting around, the quantity of ethanol that he says is coming, one can produce is something mind-blowing. I'm sure it will pick up among all, and then it will definitely help in boosting our economy. I also thank Shri J.K. Hegde. When I requested, he was a little reluctant, but I'm very happy that whatever he has spoken is going to motivate many to plant Stocksii. In fact, I am myself convinced, and I'm thinking of trying it in a small way. Looks like Stocksii has got a very good potential. We need to study more, and I'm sure this will motivate many. Mr. Hegde's speech was more practical and basically giving an insight into what a farmer does and what he faces. So I would thank Mr. Hegde as well for very giving us a deep insight into Stocksii planting. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. And on behalf of entire BSA team, I would like to thank our speakers today for a very valuable session. We will continue to share more and more sessions to all of you. Please watch out for this space continually, and also follow us on YouTube and Facebook. The links are on the invitation that has been given to you. So with this, we come to Dr. Sundar Naik ji, would you like to add anything?
Nothing. Okay.
With this, we come to the conclusion of today's session, and thank you very much. Have a wonderful weekend, all of you. Namaste ji.
Thank you, one and all. Yeah.